Yeah, and we're live directly from Copy and Steel Studios in America's finest city. We are in sunny San Diego. Welcome to the Honor the Vision podcast. This is your host, Samuel Delgado, and today I have the lovely Lizbeth Garcia, also known as Sham Liz, here with me today.
Hello.
Welcome, welcome.
Hi.
It's been how long since we decided that we were going to do this? And like we talked about it and had all these micro conversations that were like podcasts, but we never had the opportunity to like put it down and record it. And we're finally here.
We're here. It manifested. We manifested this.
That's right. Something that people don't really know is that conversations between me and Liz are what prompted the name Honor the Vision. And so I am so excited to speak on something that I feel very passionate about that isn't along the lines of, you know, me usually talking about like routine or entrepreneurship. Instead, it's something that is more about like my why. And I think that it's really interesting. Even pre-show, we were talking about, you know, how we got here. And a lot of that has to do with my journey west, that East energy coming west, us having an impromptu meeting and just being very aligned in what we were going through in that transformation. But before we dig into all of that, for the people that don't know you and haven't met you, who are you? What's your story?
Well, first of all, I want to say thank you for having me. I'm super excited to be here, and I'm very honored to be part of this journey and to have been able to come across each other's journey and having the opportunity to collaborate and just simply share a message. Who am I? That's such a great question, especially I think right now where we've both acknowledged that we've gone through massive transformation, not only physically, mentally, but also emotionally and spiritually as well. Do you guys hear that? There's kind of like...
Yeah.
It's probably
a little too low.
Try that.
Okay.
This shit happens, yo. What you want from me?
It happens. I was just like making sure.
Yeah, for sure. We want people to hear the story.
Yeah, of course.
That sounds
You got to
good.
be able to share the message. Yeah, that sounds a lot better.
How we sound in the booth, Chris? We good?
Awesome. You got the best team. And so, you know, as we've embarked this transformation journey, before I even begin to share who I am, I think that I would best serve the story if I paid homage to my mentors, a few of my mentors. And I want to begin by thanking Don Miguel Ruiz and his sons, Don Miguel Ruiz Jr. and Don Jose Ruiz, I've just recently wrapped up an apprenticeship. It was a 4-month apprenticeship that I had the honor and the privilege to be a part of with them. And I mean, it was transformational to say the least. Another huge mentor of mine has been Brene Brown. You know, you smile.
Oh, I know. And
Yeah,
if you don't know, she's dropping gems right now.
Take notes. But you know, and one of the reasons why I think it is important to bring up their impact in my life, aside from the gratitude, is in hopes that, you know, you do take note, and that because within this transformation and within the message that we're about to share, you know, it's super important to just tap into some of the content and the material that helped us transform. And along with, you know, other mentors like Maya Angelou, and, you know, there's been the Tony Robbins in my life, the Gary V's, and the Sahara Roses, the Wim Hof, you know, and just, you know, within our transformation, you know, we owe it to the leaders that have stood up, that have showed up, that have shared their art. And, you know, what we're able to create with that is, you know, it's everything. And so I just want to say thank you to all the people that have really impacted me in my life. And aside from, you know, these marvelous teachers, I also want to thank my family and my friends that have been, you know, just massive part of my transformation and my healing. But now to share with you who I am.
I love it. Yeah, it's amazing. Even just hearing you recall some of those people, I was reminded by like the topics that we've often gone on rants about. And it's amazing just to see the range, you know.
Yeah, of course.
All of those people, I believe, share something that we all need to hear. And I think that for me, sitting here now, you know, developing this podcast, having you on the show, being here part of the Copy and Steal team, I want to encourage people to stand up and use their voice because there's someone out there that needs to hear that story.
Yeah. I think especially people like you and I with, you know, our background and our story, which I'm very excited to start digging into and to just, you know, start sharing with the world where we come from. And, you know, not to make, you know, just my intro anymore longer, but, you know, just to share a little bit is, my name's Lisbeth Garcia Lizárraga, de hecho Lizárrago, because se equivocaron, they messed up in my birth certificate. So
as often happens if you're Latino.
If you're Latino.
Yeah.
But I am a first generation Mexican American woman. I was born in Las Vegas, Nevada, and my family is from Sinaloa, Mexico. I am the eldest of 4, and everything that comes, all the beauty that comes with that. And I am, who am I? Oh my goodness. There's so much that I could share, but, you know, more than anything, I have been a woman who loves her family, who shows up for her family. And, you know, growing up in Las Vegas, I was exposed to people from all over the world. And I got an understanding of there's more that connects us than that separates us, although often many narratives share something different.
Wow.
And we moved a lot. We were nomads. I was pretty much the new girl every year that I went to school, almost every grade level. So I actually became masterful at introductions. Although this one might not be, this one was a little bit different. But, you know, I just, you know, meeting new people became just part of life. And I think the most stable my family and I were was when I was in middle school and when I was in college, and both events in which my family and I experienced life-altering events. And the first one being my mom's deportation. I was 14 years old. We were about to celebrate my quinceañera, which is like kind of a woman's coming out in my culture and being, you know, Latina. And it was 2 weeks before my quinceañera, or the big party, where my mom was deported. And, you know, not to make a long story short, you know, it was the reason why this happened. It was a logistical error. And just, you know, my parents not having enough knowledge, oftentimes even like the ability to communicate with
language,
the assessors. Yeah, the people that were, you know, that they seeked assistance from, right? They didn't really have the best communication. And then the second event in which we had, you know, the second life-altering event was my father's walking away from my siblings and I was in college at the time. So my siblings, actually at the time I was traveling abroad, I was in Argentina. And my siblings were like, Liz, like dad's leaving. What are we going to do? You know, and coming from where I came from. So having grown up in Vegas, the way our lifestyle worked was just like 9 months we spent in the United States, and then growing up Hispanic, like the summers you spent, you know, and back home.
Back in your home country.
Yeah, so we would spend them in Sinaloa. So we grew up knowing both cultures very, very well, which I know it was such a beautiful gift because I got to grow up very in tune with my heritage and, you know, where I come from and where my parents came from, and getting to know their narrative and their story. And, you know, just having had that opportunity opened my eyes to the different realities that exist amongst, you know, just Mexico and the United States. But also there's the narratives that are introduced to you when you're growing up, For example, el venirse al norte, coming to the north in search of a better life.
The pilgrimage.
So exactly,
Yeah.
and having been born the eldest of four, for me, it was more of a, passing on the legacy. That was my duty as the eldest, right? Passing that opportunity on to the next generations, and also knowing the reality in, for example, in Sinaloa, comparing to the opportunities that exist here. Kids that I grew up with, that I had very, very different opportunities that I did, not only just opportunities, but their options were just so much more limited. And so to me, it was kind of a no-brainer. It was a no-brainer just to, step up. And like, at the time I was working part-time. I was working part-time at a retail store, and I was coming back negative, essentially, because I had been traveling abroad. I was in Argentina, but I had just gotten a little glimpse of some of the wonderful experiences that you can have in life. I was studying abroad, and like, I wanted my siblings to have that. And so, I took it upon myself. And at that time, I became mom and dad full time, college student full time. And because things aligned themselves, I was promoted to full time management at the retail store. And I pushed through, and we were able to acquire our degree in psychology from San Diego State University. And somehow, raise my siblings. And I tell the story of how I was able to come back into the United States because, when I came back from Argentina, we were living at that time, since my dad had left, we were living with my mom in Mexico. And in order to come back to the United States, I had a little Honda Accord that actually my friends called the Survivor, because this car, yeah, because it got stolen 3 times in Mexico, in Mexicali. And I remember the last time that, one of the times that I picked it up, the cops were like, "Oh, so what did you find? Was it the steering wheel? Are you here for like a glass or something?" And I was like, "Don't tell me that. I worked too hard to get this car." And so when I picked up the car, and I picked up the car, whatever, they shared that. But coming back to the United States, I had to make a 3-hour line in that car that had no AC. It was in the middle of the summer. And in the valley, it gets like 130 degree
Wow.
in the summer. So just imagine that.
Yeah.
Like,
Just to paint a picture for our listeners geographically, because even for myself, being an East Coaster, being on the West Coast has made me more in tune with like the desert and like where TJ is in Baja California. Where is the area in the United States that you were coming back to, and what part of Mexico were you crossing from?
and to create a better picture, so once my mom got deported, we moved, closer to the border. So she moved to Mexicali, and we moved to El Centro, which is 2 hours east from San Diego.
Okay.
So if you take literally like the Freeway 8 that you can pick up here in OB, just go all the way straight 2 hours, and you'll hit the city of El Centro. So that's where we moved from Las Vegas. And so we basically grew up here after, my dad left. And this is the city that raised us for that time being, since I was 16 at the time where I moved, but 14 going on 15 when my family moved. I finished up my school year, and then I actually went to 4 different high schools. I've moved a lot, but anyway, I lost my train of thought.
No worries.
Going back.
So
We can clip that.
clip that shit.
I'm like, wait, let me rewire. I got to get back to it.
For sure.
Crossing the car.
Yeah,
But,
of course.
yeah. Sorry.
Please. No, please.
So when I was, shit, guys, sorry.
That's okay. So I'm hearing a common message of like resilience in your young teenage years and stepping into adulthood, and you were placed with these heavy responsibilities, and I can relate to that. And I think that our relationship kind of we were able to really connect over like growing up in this country as young Latinos that's not just like a you story. It's a story that our people share time and time again. It's actually become natural to hear of like a family member being deported, or a single member, raising the family, in many cases, and not a parent, in many cases it being an older sibling. And I know, in the last episode, I shared a little bit, and I know I've shared this story with you. I grew up in church, and my dad was a pastor. And so we were a pastor of a Latino church.
Mm-hmm.
And, 80%, 90% of the people in our church didn't have status in this country.
Mm-hmm.
All were going through very similar things. So hearing that story really pulls on my heartstrings and reminds me of, how we kind of came to say, hey, like, we can have good conversations. We need to stand up and have those conversations, because it reminds me all too often of that moment where like our parents were taken advantage of because of a lack of, either knowledge or the ability to communicate. And I would go on record and say, you and I are excellent communicators, and we speak well in both languages. And there is, I've spoken on this before, even on social media. There is not enough Latino creators or, Latino entrepreneurs. Like, you mentioned a lot of these names, and outside of, the Ruiz family that's brought like, and I'm okay with it because I'm down with the fact that they're holding down the spiritual angle. There's not a lot of those models that, are out there. And so I truly believe that the, experiences that you went through, every little bit of them, forged you into the woman that you've become today, and into the friend that I'm so happy to know and to have these conversations with.
Absolutely. I mean, and knowing that, these experiences that we've been trusted with, essentially, they're only set out to help shape your narrative, help shape your story. And, one of the powerful things that I've learned from the Reese family is that, being able to communicating your story in a way in which we're no longer hurting ourselves with that narrative, and that we're no longer, just feeding perhaps like outside, voices, and it being your own, satisfying what makes you happy and what makes your authentic self happy, essentially, and we all work for the same boss, as Don Jose, Ruiz always shares. And the reason why we've gone through these things, and the reason why it's so important for us to hop on and start to share these narratives, is so, the power of representation matters. And our people, it's time for them to know that our experiences are not unique, and which kind of will lead me into like our next, just sharing about my experience in the facility with unaccompanied minors. One of the reasons why, after having been presented with that opportunity to raise my siblings and to hop on board into, different opportunities to learn essentially different roles and put on different hats, and being able to show up in different ways. Yeah. Yeah, it's crazy because I never thought I'd be a teacher, truthfully. Had you asked me, with the background in psychology, prior even studying psychology, my first areas of interest were architecture or like business. I was going to do international business. I wanted to travel. I knew I was going to be an entrepreneur. My mom taught us that skill since we were very, very young. My father was a truck driver, and that's another thing that we share in common. Excuse me.
I forgot all about that, actually.
Yeah.
So just now I smiled. I was like, oh, yeah.
Yeah.
When I went home, I'm like on Instagram, like, son of a trucker.
Son of a trucker. That's a good one.
I'm punny sometimes.
Oh my God. Okay, no. Stop. But
my guy.
But just hopping back onto that, and some of the, experiences that I had in that, with that journey, with, working there, and then also with tying it together with my mom. So actually, when I was 18 years old, I had the opportunity to go to DC and meet up with youth from all over the nation, and actually all over the world. There was people from Argentina, which we ended up meeting back later when I studied abroad.
That's very cool.
There was people from China, from Italy, from all over.
Wow.
And it was all youth. And it was a huge youth conference for a program called, I believe it was Close Up.
Okay.
And so it was a week-long event. And we had the opportunity to present some of the whether it be like hardships or like things that mattered to the youth within our, different areas. We had the opportunity to like have debates with conservatives, with liberals. I met Senator Jerry Brown. I sat outside his office for hours, and we presented, some of the different narratives that were of importance to us. And the narrative that I shared specifically was the separation of families because, having had that experience at such a young age, I was 14 at the time. My siblings were even younger than me. It was something that obviously had shaped me, and I knew that it was something that was taking place within my community and that I wasn't the only one. And the only response that I got was wait for the laws to change. And I met with numerous amounts of lawyers in Nevada, numerous amounts of lawyers in California that all said the same thing, wait for the laws to change. While I was working in this facility for unaccompanied minors, we had, political candidates and political leaders that came into our facility, including the Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi. I don't know. The Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi, thank you. And these people saw, what firsthand. Yeah. And for such a long time for them to just say, wait for the laws to change, wait for the laws to change. Well, who's changing these laws? Who's responsible to change these laws? Why aren't these laws being changed when they're to where they can actually serve our people? And, what do we have to do? And I think that one of the biggest reasons why we have to hop on these mics, whether we're ready for it or not, because truthfully, today I didn't know if I was ready, but I'm like, I know it's time. I have to do this because it's not even up to me anymore.
Yes.
It's not. And, whether we're going to mess up, and that's okay.
Totally fine with me.
But it's time because this is a reality that's happening, and this is what America is. And I'm not going to say it's the only thing, but this is my experience and my siblings' experience.
Yeah, and you're passionate about it, and you feel called to,
of course,
to play a part in that.
Especially because, my experience happened, I was 14 years old. I mean, it's been 14, I'm 28 years old now. It's been 14 years, and my mom's still in Mexico, and the laws still haven't changed. So, how much longer do we have to wait? It's been half my lifetime. And this is only one of the many narratives in which legislation does not match up to the needs of the population. So I guess to wrap up what we were saying earlier, the different experiences that we're trusted with, oftentimes are the lessons that help shape, mold your why. And to tie it back into where, we began the podcast, discussing our why, for me, some of the early experiences that my siblings and I, we were presented with, definitely did shape who we've become, today, and everything that comes with that, right? But once you realize that you're able to take control of that narrative, I think that's when the real transformation begins. And once you are able to not only take control of that narrative, but repurpose it and reframe it and tell your story to where you are sharing your truth, not just everything that you were taught to think, everything that you were taught to believe, and the way in which you were introduce the world, and sometimes the lens in which we see the world in. But just owning that, and throughout this year, I think that that's definitely been a common thread for me, in every way, shape, and form, whether it be with friends, whether it be, with my family, whether it be with, business ventures and opportunities, just realizing that you're the only one in control of you and nobody else is. And essentially you're the only one, Don Miguel Ruiz Jr. always shares, we can only control up to the tip of my finger. That's all I can control. And to share where the name, Shameless comes from, I mean, I think there's several stories behind that. But aside from, diving into the shamanism and the teachings of the Toltec, there's been throughout this thread, there's been a realization that, I mean, first of all, there's the where, what I was sharing with you earlier, the Hawkins scale of consciousness. And essentially what this scale, shares is the frequency in which different emotions vibrate in, and the lowest vibrating emotion being shame, and one of the highest being love, and the highest frequency being enlightenment. And the journey of shamelessness, and essentially, my personal journey has been to navigate and to dive into these different emotions as I am navigating these different narratives that, as a family, my family, we've been diving into. And I truly believe that that's how I've found my personal healing, and being able to own these emotions, acknowledging them when I feel them. And, because when whether it be like in lowing vibrating frequencies, like we know that, we feel that, you can acknowledge that. And I think there's power in simply being able to acknowledge it. If there's the whole, like in AA, there's like the 12-step process, right? And the first one being acknowledging that there's a problem, right? Not that our emotions are a problem, but
it's more of just like an awareness.
Exactly.
And how awareness. Fundamental that is, having that awareness, and how that helps us maneuver through life.
Exactly. And just being able to move through that scale and it be a tool. And I think that, as a woman, oftentimes we're more encouraged to, dive into our emotions. I think that in Western astrology, I'm a Scorpio. In Vedic astrology, I'm a Libra.
Wow.
And so I think having had the background of the Scorpio, and like in it being okay in a way for me to dive into my emotions and to be that emotional being, right? Also having been Latina,
You've been granted 2 hall passes in this lifetime.
have they been hall passes? I don't know about that, but and just really having allowed myself that, I think that's been one of my superpowers. Truly has been the fact that I've granted myself the permission to immerse myself into life, and whatever chapter it's been, like I've immersed myself into that experience. And having had that, whether you call it a hall pass or whether you call it, just whatever it's been.
Yeah.
I gave myself that permission to just be bold and feel it and not be afraid of it. And
step into your power.
Exactly. And life will also strip you away from different things that you think that give you personal importance, whether it be a job, whether it be a title, whether it be wife, whether it be, and honestly, I've shared with you, like life stripped me away from everything that I thought gave me personal importance, whether it be my job. I thought that was my dream job. I was traveling abroad I was traveling, nationwide with other fellow, with entrepreneurs, real estate investors, and the amount of knowledge that I was able to learn from them, and just the experiences and everything was wonderful. And pandemic hit, boom. I was going through a divorce. I was going through a really hard loss, and, through all the changes that we've all gone through with the pandemic, and we lost my father to COVID. And, it's just been, sometimes I'm just like, how am I able to even articulate this right now? Like,
it's incredible, honestly.
Because it has been a lot, but just to see where my family is at and where we're at, and the healing that we've been able to just alchemize, and how we've been able to convert, just the different challenges and the different narratives into just this like light and this beauty. And it's just been amazing. And the perspective shift and the way in which we're able to see things now. And it's just, I mean, it's amazing, and how much closer we are too. And you can't put a price on that. Like, that's something that I always share with my siblings. Like, tenemos todo lo que no tiene precio. You know, I truly believe that life is about acquiring all the things that que no tienen precio, that you can't put a price on.
That's right.
And that's real wealth.
That is real wealth. I agree.
Know?
I just want to say thank you so much for being so brave and for sharing that story. It's a story that, again, speaks heavily on resilience, adversity. It's an incredible honor to have befriended you and to share this journey together and to explore these awesome subjects such as shamanism and spirituality and entrepreneurship, and most importantly, how we can have this impact in our community by sharing our story, by practicing, by having these conversations, by discussing what those narratives might be. And it just reminds me and just makes me so happy that like that is where this rebranding started when I got to California, where I abandoned the old moniker of Wolf of Market Street, which, like you said, life has this way of just stripping you of these titles and these things. And I went from being this Latino, pastor's kid, trucker, like all these titles that like cease to have meaning because they only have meaning when people know about them, right? But when I ended up in this new place and I was presented with the opportunity to express, who I was and to befriend and make these new connections from a place that I wasn't used to, working at a dispensary as a bud tender, like I'm used to playing the role of agency owner in a suit, like, creating things. And so even from that place, I was able to tap back into like just being myself and my personality. And it's just full circle and it's so beautiful. And thank you for, getting in front of the mic with me, for believing in this podcast, for believing in yourself, and in me, because I know and I feel that support ever so present ever since we engaged and started having these conversations. And it was in a conversation much like this, no mics, no cameras. We were probably near the beach, having a deep exchange of like these adversities that we've overcome as Latinos. And, like this idea was born. I was like, let's start a podcast. And like your eyes lit up and there was this excitement. And I was like, all right, like she's excited about it. I'll be excited about it too. And I remember like, just with my background in marketing, I was like, what are we going to call this thing? Like, what is it that, really summarizes like the how I feel about not just Latinos but the world in itself, and like what is that common thread that connects my journey of entrepreneurship, my journey of spirituality, like these pillars that this brand now sits on. And I came up with the honor of the vision. I remember like making an Instagram like, Liz, like it's gonna be awesome. And we were just both still in our journeys and like in our healing, and that evolved. And just for the people that understand the reference to the show Shameless, you've had a for better or for worse a very
too
like
accurate.
it was a movie. It was a movie
to the show.
it took like to the T.
Way to the
they
T.
wrote the script.
We're just, my siblings and I joke, we say we're like just the Latin version of Shameless.
I love it. Yeah, the Sinaloense version.
The Sinaloense version.
Yeah, we should just I don't know, make it. Yeah,
like and then
take
also
it to Mexico.
the journey, right? The journey through the Hawkins scale. So it's only we're all on a journey, and we're still on this journey of just finding whether it be the toolbox that helps us navigate these narratives, whether it be just finding the healing and the collective frequencies, though, that we can all elevate our consciousness and just being able just help each other.
I love that. And I think that that's kind of what we came here to do, is to I think we agree that we were called to collaborate. And we still haven't really been able to define on what level that is. Like, is it a podcast? Is it, recently we were able to, shout out to Ty that gave us that incredible opportunity to like go be a part of and donate time and just energy.
Serve the community.
And serve. And I know that like we were like, yes, this is what we want to do. And like we're chasing impact and not money. And it's so much more simpler when you're not chasing like money or like advancement in career. Yeah. Like you're just loving and you're just giving, and there's this act of surrendering, and it was an incredible opportunity to join and go donate that clothes and I was hungry, and I was like, how do I do more of that? And it was shortly after that I was like, and even like when I was explaining, because I had a need. I was like, people don't even know that this is happening. Like they don't have any idea. And like I received a lot of messages on Instagram. People were like, wow, that's really incredible. Like, let me know if there's anything that I can do. And one of the things that I really love about San Diego, outside of like the, Spanish namings of everything, is the heavily populated Latino, population here. Like we are the, in a sense, a majority, everywhere you go.
Absolutely.
And
I
so
mean,
there's a lot of work to be done and so
yes.
much to be shared.
Yes. And I mean, thank you. Thank you for creating this space, for allowing me to be as raw and vulnerable as we're being. It does take not only the courage, but it takes like the space and the energy. So thank you for creating this and just being an extension of, this awesome team, and just for the opportunity. Thank you for inviting me to, honor the vision. And I'm excited to what we'll be able to create. I know this is just the first opportunity of many. And yeah, just want to say thank you.
This show is sponsored by Copy and Steal. If you're looking to start your own podcast, come on over to the Copy and Steal studio, where they literally do everything for you. There's 3 cameras, 3 lights, a lovely dog that will make you feel very comfortable. And today could be the day that you start your podcast here. So some notes that I had coming into this conversation, some things that I really wanted to get into. And I'll kind of just hit you with some of these. And I think this is probably the one where it all starts, where like we could really dive into like the different modalities that you mentioned, like the teachings of the shamans, specifically the Ruiz family, the psychology, the things that, Dr. Brene Brown breaks down that have had incredible impact in your life. Is how is it that we break free of that conditioning and programming? How do you do it? How do we do it? And how is it that we can start having that conversation and sharing that key to other people? Because what we've seen is a lot of like, like I would call them these waves. Like there's like the law of attraction, and like that's something that hits some people in hooks. And if you come from a Latino family, chances are like 99.9% that you grew up in a religious environment where like the parents attended and are believers and have faith, which I think in a lot of ways passes down a beautiful message, a beautiful toolkit, but it's not the only one. And what we're discovering, and what you and I think have been starting to really discover, is that like you like to say, there's that space in between these pillars that have been placed around us, where there's like a lot of healing and a lot of power. And so I'm a little more curious to hear about like your personal experience, and then I'll share as well. How have you broken free from this conditioning? What is it that you do, or like that you're striving for, that is positioning you, that you could maybe share with others, that has really been of incredible help to you? And it could be as like simple as like your daily routine, breathing exercises. Like what is it that has really helped you like get into your zone so that you can start this journey of honoring the vision in your life?
What a powerful question. Oh my goodness. I think that there's multiple ways. There's multiple ways in which to approach this. First of all, it begins with acknowledging it, right? Like we spoke earlier, just simply, it starts with acknowledging that there is a problem, and not necessarily a problem, but a dialogue to be had. Showing up for those conversations, even if they're rough, especially if they're rough conversations, whether it be with, family members, having those conversations and understanding each other's point of view. Whether or not, you don't have to come into an agreement, you can agree to disagree. You're not going to change each other. That's not what it's about. It's about listening to each other's truth, right? When it comes to healing with another person, or whether it be a family member, or whether it be a loved one. But when it comes to embarking this journey, for me personally, a lot of it started with, when I detached myself from the narratives of the world, meaning, the media and the news. So being aware of my consumption was a big thing for me. And it also started, so around right before the pandemic, I went vegetarian for Lent. And so changing my diet, my
Huge.
consumption and my diet. And so I started to notice a lot of the shifts with me personally when I embarked into like, changed that. And then I added one routine daily, which was reading my daily devotional. And while I was on the road, like, it didn't matter if I was on the road, it didn't matter if I was home. Like, that was the one thing that I was doing every day, because I knew if I was doing one thing every day, whether it be praying, whether it be, reading my devotional, which was both, it was going to be easier for me to implement other things daily.
Wow. And, that's crazy. Just to interject for a second, because like your approach was to take like a 1% each day. Like if I do one, then I can stack another. And I think that for a lot of people, they don't even know how to start with the 1%. For them, it's like, I need to change all of these things. I'm not exactly sure where I start with any of these things. And they stay stuck there. And so I think that something that like I just immediately connected there is that the friction that we've faced at the beginning of this, I think that we related a lot then, because we were still trying to, like, I wasn't waking up at 5 a.m. then. I met you, I was 40 pounds heavier. Like, I've had a physical transformation that I definitely had, guidance with, but it's really about that 1%. And so that 1% for me was, I'm going to wake up at 5 a.m. and I'm going to make it to the gym, so I love that. But please continue. So you were able to like stack the devotional and the prayer, and that was like your 1%. And what were some of the other things that you were able to work into that routine?
Yeah, so yoga was definitely one of them. Yeah, so after, implementing that, even while I was on the road, I started implementing yoga and just connecting with myself, with my body. And then one of my best friends gifted me How to Breathe book, and then I connected to my breath work. And little by little, just, things started, coming my way. And truly, one of the things that really, really shifted my perspective personally was the book The Choice by Dr. Edith Eva Eger, and who she accredits to Viktor Frankl, who is the author of the book The Man in Search for Meaning. And both of these spectacular individuals were Holocaust survivors.
Wow.
Yeah, and just coming across her work really, really helped me shift the way I saw things. And we've spoken about this before, but, and I know you mentioned it about the space in between. And there is a very famous Viktor Frankl quote that talks about that space in between. And there's, it's basically, it's like that space in between the trigger and the response, right? And that space is between really the only thing that we ever control. Why is that?
Say that again. Clip that shit, Chris.
And why is that? It's because it's how we respond to things. It's 90% of our reality is the way in which we respond to things. The 10% is what happens. Or in some
cases, people are just reacting.
Yeah. And just being aware of that, and also taking action, being aware that, once you make that choice, it's important to take action, because whether or not you take action, like, the world continues to happen, right? Like, we're continuously moving, and it's going to continue to move. And whether or not we choose to take action, the world's going to continue to revolve. And, yeah, just, those are some of the few things, along with, diving into different books, diving into the podcasts. And
what are some, maybe just even 2 podcasts that have been instrumental to you that some people, I'm always a sucker for like, give me the heat. And Dr. Brene Brown was somebody that like you reminded me that I had heard of before. And like, I started tuning in because I have that respect for you and like how you see things, and like, like you question things. And that's been an incredible podcast, one that served me really well. What are 2 that you would share with people that are listening?
I mean, for sure, Unlocking Us and Dare to Lead with Brene Brown. Those have definitely helped shape. I mean, she's a shame researcher.
Yeah.
She's a grounded theory researcher. And, I mean, Simon Sinek has also been somebody that I look up to and admire. So many. I mean, Sahara Rose has been a big inspiration as well, and huge influence. And she's in the Ayurveda, realm and spirituality for those interested in,
Helping people live out their dharmas.
exactly. And for those of you that don't know, like Ayurveda is an Eastern medicine and like way of life. And it's actually a sister science to yoga and meditation.
Wow.
So my mom introduced me to that, and you introduced me to Sahara Rose. But those are just, a few. I mean, there's so many. I mean, I'm a huge fan also of like Jay Shetty's podcast.
Yeah.
There's, Aubrey Marcus.
Aubrey Marcus, that's the heat, that's the gas.
Yeah, and
Yeah, that one's powerful. On the Ayurvedic subject, earlier you were mentioning on how like you're not this like devout, like you're not devoutly practicing, and there's something that, and I may get some pushback for this, but I don't necessarily subscribe to the notion that all things we have to be in 100%. I think that like in all things there is some good that we can take from them. And there are things that I've learned in just the little glimpse that I've had of the Ayurvedic practices that have just like completely shaped my like morning routines. So I was listening to this podcast by Dr. Ben Greenfield where he was interviewing an author that speaks on Ayurvedic medicine. And there's just like this almost like ceremonious way to like get out of bed. And where there's like this gratitude before like your feet touch the ground, then your feet touch the ground, and then like where the first thing you should do is go to the bathroom and like take water in your hand and like have that water, because what's happening is that in this practice that it's believed is that your body is so like incredible at like forming signals and communication in the form of like whatever's in your mouth while you were sleeping, that by taking that like sip of water, it sends that information down to the gut and it sends that information down and it tells your body, okay, like you need to relieve yourself, or like this is what you need to start the day. And so like small little things like that, like I haven't done the research per se, and I will, I'll come back and I'll tell you guys what's out there, but it just made a lot of sense. Intuitively, I was like, that makes a lot of sense. Like, that's probably something we should do. Whereas instead, what we're doing, and I'm not trying to get into the whole like, oh, what kind of toothpaste to use to brush your teeth. Like, that's not who I am. But there is something to be considered, like when you're starting to audit and really like look at what are the things that I do that maybe I was doing just subconsciously that is a part of that programming. Like that programming is not all mental sometimes. Like, and this is just so big for me because like I went home and, I spent, and I'm not, trying to shame the snacks my mom gets. Like, it's just like what it is. Like my mom was a hardworking mom. They cleaned houses. My dad was on the road driving trucks, still are doing these things. And I'm sitting there with my 14-year-old brother and I'm holding space for him, just hanging out, like just happy to be home. And like, I would like realize like, because now I'm on this journey where I'm like just very conscious of what I put in my body. And like you were talking about how like that fuel, that consumption of what, and I'm like, ooh, look, my favorite cookies that I grew up eating. Ooh, look, my favorite cereal that I grew up eating. Like we're just taking these things like the sugar, it was just crazy to me. And so like now at like, the same age, 10 years, my brother is 14. I'm 14 years older. I was 14 when he was born. So like going home, that was like a really interesting thing to see. I was like, wow, I was your like size and at your level of, growth when you came into the world. And now, and trust me, there's a point to this. It's like, how do I start having that conversation with him? How do I go, hey, listen, like mom is a great mom. As a matter of fact, she buys you all these great snacks because she loves you and wants to make sure that you have a plentiful, options to choose from. But this druggy food, this like stuff that tastes so good is not good for you. And like, I don't want him to be in a situation where like at 26 or 27 years of his life, he's like having to, like eat the meal plan that I eat and work out the way that I do to try to like just honor my body and get to that like best looking version of myself. And so I think that just like way too often, just in our society in general, but specifically in like the Latino families, because they tend to be like overworking, like no time, and just there's a level of education and knowledge that's not being passed down to them, right?
Absolutely.
That there's just that disconnect. And it's like, how do I do that? And so like, that's my like, that's where I'm at now, is like, how do I pass along this information? Because the one thing that I've learned is that like now that I'm modeling this behavior, because like he takes after a lot of the things I did. when he was growing up and he saw 14, 15, 16-year-old Sam. Like, he's a gamer and he's a sick gamer. And, and he loves, like, challenging me to the 1v1s. He still loses. One day you're going to hear this. I'm still better than you. It's one of those things that, like, it's like, how do I model? So now that he sees, like, I'm waking up early and I'm doing these things, how do we start having that conversation? And then, so that's for me, like, where, like, I got this, like, okay, I need to start podcasting. I need to start practicing the way that, like, I even put words together and, like, the way that we can present information.
I think that you're touching in on something super duper powerful. Like, it's such a profound narrative, because things like diabetes, things like, just these kinds of, cancer and different diseases are so present, especially within the Latino community. And we saw it, in my experience just alone. Like, my father was diabetic, and, that's why we lost him to COVID, because, of the lack of awareness that comes with the way in which we eat. And it's unfortunate, but I love that we're starting to have this dialogue, and we're, navigating as the leaders for the next generation. We're looking, to change just to lead by example. And I think that, we shouldn't be so hard on ourselves. I think that we're definitely on the right path. And whether or not, like, just touching up on what you said earlier, they're just tools. You pick up what serves you and what connects with you, and
you get to build your own toolbox.
Exactly. And actually, when I was an educator, that one of my mentors, Teacher Mike, he always spoke in regards to the toolbox, and
I love that.
Granting our students with different skill sets that they could take anywhere and implement, whether it be public speaking, whether it be, introducing themselves and, sharing a good handshake, whether just basic life skills that they could put into their toolbox. And I love to see that as we've grown in our journey and our evolution, we've come across these different tools, and we've been able to implement, whether it be teachings from shamanism, whether it be, whether it be Eastern medicine, whether it be the fact that we have access to this information. I mean, there's never been a better time to be alive, truly, because a 5-year-old has access to more information than people did back in the day, and it's just, it's mind blowing. It really is. And just the fact that we're able to come across these different teachings and change our lives and the lives of our just the generations to come. And we do have the tools now. And I mean, there's no doubt that we have the will and there's the why. So let's do it, my friend.
I love it. I love it. I love that. Just to touch on somebody you brought up who I'm an incredible fan of, Simon Sinek. Simon Sinek has a book. Have you read The Infinite Game yet?
I haven't read it yet, but I've listened to a few of his podcasts.
Yeah,
so
it's so good. And I love that we can do that now. By the way, you guys are just sleeping on the podcast. Like, you can literally just go, like, download information in the form of audio right into your brain that comes from these people that are promoting their books, where, like, they've done the research and this incredible work to share this knowledge with you. Like,
it's almost like the modern day Cliff Notes. Like,
yeah, exactly. It's exactly what it is.
Yeah, I just dive into it, listen, and it's even better because you're getting, like, the raw, experience or dialogue. I mean, it's awesome.
Yeah. He talks about the infinite game, and he talks about, like, in any situation, there are two games being played, a finite game and an infinite game. And you don't have a choice. You don't get to choose if it's an infinite game or a finite game. You just get to choose if you're going to be involved, like, if you're going to be a part of that. And, Simon Sinek is somebody that, like, in a podcast actually with Aubrey Marcus, where I was reminded of how much I liked his teachings, because, just like the start with why and how much, I mean, could be pulled in even into what we're talking about. He talks about, like, if it weren't for, like, our societal programming and, like, the fact that, like, like the level, and we've talked about this heavily, like, the level that leadership has been, or, like, the level that bad, good, like whatever level of leadership that's been on display, if you think back to like the most recent elections and like the like polarized left versus right, the things that are happening right now in Palestine and Israel, like there's just this polarization, and what you're seeing is like a lack of leadership. And he's made a career out of being able to like share with others, like this is how to be a better leader, and like he's just done so well at framing those things. It's just awesome, Simon Sinek. Thank you. But also, how do we, this next generation, carry these teachings, right? And how do we deploy and build more leaders? Because like we can't do it alone,
Right.
and like that's what I'm doing. Like honor the vision to me is just like we can't do it alone. It's not about money anymore. For the longest time in my life, it was about the money. It was about the money. Like, Sam, you got to get the Lambo. Sam, you got to get the Lambo. Like, to me, that was going to be some sort of milestone marker that was going to be like the Latino kid with the parents that migrated to America made it. And it's not about that anymore. It's like that was East Coast Sam. West Coast Sam's just like, how can we have impact in the world, and who wants to do this, and will you come with me?
Yeah.
Yeah, so Simon Sinek.
Love it. Love to hear it.
That's a great book. I would highly recommend for sure. There's also just because we're talking about books, Peter Thiel has one that's called From Zero to One, and I feel like those are both like that's gas.
I actually haven't heard of that one. I'll have to.
Yeah, it's like all about like how things start. Like a lot of people try to just like go from one to one. Actually, it's Chris would resonate with this one, the copy and steal vibe. It's like going from 0 to 1. Talks about innovation. Yeah, we did it.
We did it.
We did it. We recorded an episode. Thank you so much for joining me and exploring all of these things. Is there anything that you would like to leave people with before we sign off?
First of all, again, thank you. Thank you for creating this space. Thank you for, inviting me and allowing me to be a part of this. But if there was something that I wanted to leave people with, it would just be to show up. Yeah.
I love it. That's it, guys. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you in the next one. Peace.